Welcome to the Corporate Greed Iceberg, a journey from the familiar tales into the deeper, often hidden realms of corporate misconduct. At the surface, we're all familiar with the high-profile stories about child labor and cigarette marketing, but as we dive deeper, we uncover lesser-known issues from the insidious manipulation of zero-hour contracts to the controversial practice of sulfur mining. Further down in the murky depths lie the scarcely told stories of profound corporate misdeeds like the chilling account of the destruction of the Aral Sea and the tragic repercussions of the Bhopal gas disaster. Join us as we navigate from the tip of the iceberg down to its vast, hidden base, exposing the full extent of corporate greed in its many forms. Tier 1. Right to Repair. The right to repair movement is a significant push against a backdrop of consumer electronics designed to discourage repairs and maintenance by the end user. This movement has gained traction in response to manufacturers using non-standard components, restrictive software locks, and legal warnings to limit third-party repairs. Tech giants, notably in the smartphone industry, have been critiqued for practices like gluing batteries into devices, effectively shortening the product lifespan and compelling consumers to seek expensive manufacturer repairs or replacements. This not only raises issues of consumer freedom, but also contributes to the growing problem of electronic waste as devices are discarded long before their components have reached the end of their usable life. Right to repair legislation aims to ensure that consumers and independent repair shops have the information, tools, and parts necessary to fix products, promoting longevity and sustainability in the face of intentional corporate obsolescence. Sweatshops. Sweatshops are the dark underbelly of the global supply chain, where the relentless demand for cheap consumer goods results in deplorable working conditions. In a notable example, certain facilities in China producing Apple products implemented drastic measures such as safety nets to prevent worker suicides, casting a spotlight on the extreme working environments that employees endure. Overcrowded, underventilated, and unsafe, these workplaces are a stark reminder of the human cost paid for the world's relentless consumerism. Companies often distance themselves from these practices through layers of subcontracting, but the reality remains that the low-cost manufacturing is achieved at the expense of worker welfare, throwing ethical considerations into a sharp relief against the backdrop of corporate profit margins. Bottled water is tap water. Bottled water companies have come under scrutiny for selling products that are sometimes little more than repackaged tap water, marketed as pure or spring water with a substantial markup. Controversies have arisen, such as with Coca-Cola's Dasani brand in the UK, where the public felt deceived upon learning that the bottled water they purchased at a premium was sourced from municipal supplies. This practice raises questions about the ethics of commodifying a basic resource and the environmental impact of plastic waste associated with bottled water, which is often no safer or healthier than tap water from regulated municipal sources. Child labor. The enduring issue of child labor highlights the intersection of poverty, education, and corporate profit. Across industries, from the cocoa fields feeding the world's chocolate supply to textile factories producing fast fashion, children are employed in tasks that often jeopardize their health, development, and education. Companies like Nestle have faced criticism over their supply chains, which in some cases have been tainted by the involvement of child labor. Efforts to eradicate this practice clash with deep-seated economic incentives that favor cheap labor costs, often at the expense of social and moral responsibility. Despite international protocols and increased awareness, the complete elimination of child labor continues to be an elusive goal with complex socio-economic factors at play. Military entertainment complex. The military entertainment complex is an intriguing facet of modern media where the lines between entertainment and military propaganda blur. Through collaborations that often involve financial backing, technical support, and access to military assets, the entertainment industry produces content that can subtly promote military ideologies. Critics argue that this symbiotic relationship may compromise artistic integrity and influence public sentiment on military matters. Films and video games, in particular, are platforms where such partnerships are prominent, leading to narratives that often glamorize military action and could potentially serve as recruitment tools, subtly shaping public perception and opinion on national defense and military intervention. Fast food toys. The strategy of including toys with fast food meals has been a successful yet controversial marketing tactic, particularly employed by McDonald's, effectively making them one of the largest toy distributors in the world. Aimed primarily at children, these toys have been criticized for contributing to unhealthy eating habits by making fast food more attractive to young audiences. The ethical implications of this practice have prompted some countries to ban the inclusion of toys in fast food meals altogether. The debate centers around the responsibility of corporations to protect the health of their consumers, particularly children, versus the pursuit of profit through targeted marketing strategies that exploit children's natural affinity for toys and play. The house always wins. The adage, "the house always wins," is commonly associated with gambling and casinos, where games are designed to ensure a consistent profit for the establishment. This phrase has broader implications, encapsulating a corporate mentality where systems are structured to favor the company, often at the expense of the consumer or the public. It can apply to a range of industries where the odds are set in such a way that the company's profits are protected and the consumer's chances of coming out ahead are minimal. This concept has come to symbolize the inherent imbalance of power between corporations and consumers, with transparency and fairness often falling by the wayside in the pursuit of corporate gain. Amazon versus Diapers.com. The story of Amazon's aggressive tactics against Diapers.com is a stark example of how big corporations can leverage their market power to drive out competition. When Diapers.com declined an acquisition offer, Amazon engaged in predatory pricing on their own diaper products, incurring losses that Diapers.com could not sustain, eventually leading to its sale to Amazon. This tactic and subsequent closure of the acquired company illustrates the cutthroat nature of corporate competition, where dominant players can manipulate market dynamics to eliminate rivals and consolidate their position, often at the expense of consumer choice and market diversity. Snake oil salesman. The term snake oil salesman has become synonymous with deception and fraud, particularly in the context of health products that promise miraculous cures without scientific basis. Today, this practice manifests in the sale of questionable supplements and herbal medicines that exploit consumer trust and desperation. Despite regulatory efforts, the market is still rife with products that offer unsubstantiated health claims, preying on the uninformed and the hopeful, and reflecting a broader issue of misinformation and exploitation in the health and wellness industry. News of the World phone hacking scandal. The News of the World phone hacking scandal is a grim testament to the lengths some media outlets will go to obtain a story. the British newspaper was found to have engaged in illegal phone hacking of celebrities, politicians, and even private individuals in distressing circumstances such as murder victims and their families. This gross invasion of privacy, driven by the hunger for sensational stories and increased circulation, led to public outrage, legal action, and the eventual shutdown of the newspaper, raising serious concerns about ethics in journalism and privacy in the digital age. Adobe's business practices. Adobe, known for its extensive suite of creative software, has faced criticism for its business practices, including the shift to a subscription-based model and the enforcement of patents that some argue stifle competition. This has led to debates about software accessibility and the balance between protecting intellectual property and fostering an innovative and competitive market. Consumers and competitors alike have scrutinized Adobe's approach, highlighting the tension between corporate profit strategies and the ideal of a market driven by consumer choice and innovation. Vitamins and minerals in junk food. The fortification of junk food with vitamins and minerals is a marketing strategy that has been questioned for its ethical implications. Companies promote these enriched products as healthier options despite their high content of sugar, fat, and additives. This practice has been particularly scrutinized in Europe, where a study found that many products with health claims failed to meet nutritional criteria for being considered healthy. The addition of health-oriented labels to inherently unhealthy products can mislead consumers, especially those trying to make better dietary options, and demonstrates the complex relationship between marketing practices and public health. Fire Festival Scandal. The Fire Festival scandal became a byword for disastrous event planning and fraudulent promotion. Marketed as a luxury music festival experience, it famously failed to deliver on almost every promise, leaving attendees stranded with inadequate food, shelter, and security. The scandal highlighted not only the reckless mismanagement by the organizers, but also their deliberate deception of investors and customers. It serves as a cautionary tale about the power of marketing and the potential for social media hype to mask a lack of substance with serious financial and reputational consequences for all involved. Tier 2. Phoebus Cartel. The Phoebus Cartel is a notorious example of corporate collusion where major light bulb manufacturers around the world, including General Electric, Osram, and Philips, conspired to control the light bulb industry by agreeing to limit the lifespan of their bulbs. Established in the 1920s, the cartel's members standardized light bulbs to ensure they would fail after a set number of hours, compelling consumers to purchase replacements more often. This blatant manipulation of product life not only undermined consumer trust, but also stunted technological advancements in durability, all for the sake of maintaining market share and profits. It was an early instance of planned obsolescence, a strategy that has since become a widespread concern among consumers and environmentalists alike. Sulfur mining. Sulfur mining, notably in the Ijen volcano complex in Indonesia, is a grueling and hazardous profession. Miners face arduous labor conditions, trekking up the volcano and descending into the crater to harvest chunks of sulfur from the fumaroles, all without adequate protective gear. Paid by the weight of sulfur they extract, workers often endure oppressive loads that can lead to severe physical injuries. Additionally, the constant exposure to toxic sulfur fumes without respiratory protection can cause long-term health issues, including chronic lung diseases. Despite the inherent risks, the demand for sulfur in various industries compels these miners to continue, often out of economic necessity, reflecting a stark disparity between the well-being of workers and the demands of industrial consumption. Cigarette marketing. The realm of cigarette marketing is marred by strategies that highlight the extent of corporate callousness when profits are at stake. For decades, tobacco companies have engaged in deceptive marketing practices, from targeting vulnerable demographics to manipulating nicotine levels to ensure addiction. Their strategies have included glamorizing smoking in media and even using medical professionals in advertisements to quell health concerns. The brazenness reached new heights when internal documents from one company revealed a disturbing perspective. Early deaths due to smoking could be economically beneficial as they decrease the financial burden of caring for the elderly. These practices have led to widespread public health crises, with legal and social battles continuing to address the fallout. East India Company monopoly/opium wars. The British East India Company's monopoly was not just a trade empire, but also a catalyst for one of the most morally ambiguous chapters of the 19th century, the Opium Wars. The company's insidious strategy to counteract the trade deficit with China by smuggling opium led to widespread addiction, destabilizing Chinese society and economy. When China resisted the opium trade, the resulting conflicts exemplified the extent to which a corporate entity backed by a national military would go to secure its financial interests. The wars not only reflected the exploitative practices of colonial powers, but also set a precedent for the lengths corporation would go to ensure market dominance. Coca-Cola in Africa. Coca-Cola's presence in Africa is so ubiquitous that the brand is more readily available than basic necessities like clean water in some areas. This fact raises significant ethical concerns about the company's practices on the continent. In certain villages, locals have reported wells running dry after the establishment of Coca-Cola bottling plants, a situation that poses serious questions about resource allocation and corporate responsibility. Additionally, Coca-Cola's role as a major plastic producer contributes significantly to environmental degradation, an issue that compounds the ethical implications of their business operations in regions already facing ecological challenges. Price fixing. Price fixing is an illicit practice where ostensibly competing companies collude to set prices at a certain level, stifling competition and keeping prices artificially high for consumers. This can occur in any industry, from technology and pharmaceuticals to basic consumer goods, and it undermines the principles of a free market. Legal battles against price-fixing cartels have revealed how pervasive this practice can be, with companies often engaging in secret agreements at the expense of the consumer. Investigations often unveil that these are not isolated incidents, but rather a systemic problem, with companies caught in these schemes facing hefty fines and damaged reputations. However, the allure of stabilized profits at a high level often tempts corporations back into these anti-competitive agreements, perpetuating a cycle that regulatory bodies continually strive to break. Volkswagen's emissions scandal. The Volkswagen's emissions scandal, also known as Dieselgate, exposed the automotive giant's deceitful practices when the company installed defeat devices in diesel engines to cheat on emissions tests. This software could detect when vehicles were being tested and temporarily reduce emissions to meet legal standards, only to revert to higher emissions under normal driving conditions. This scandal not only led to billions in fines and a severe hit to Volkswagen's credibility, but also raised broader concerns about corporate governance and environmental accountability. It was a stark reminder that even the most trusted companies might prioritize profits over planetary health, leaving consumers and the environment to pay the price. Toyota vehicle recalls. Toyota, a brand synonymous with reliability, faced a significant blow to its reputation with a series of vehicle recalls due to a variety of safety issues, most notoriously for accelerator pedals that could become stuck. This defect led to accidents and fatalities, including a harrowing incident where a family was killed after being unable to stop their vehicle. In response, Toyota not only initiated recalls affecting millions of vehicles, but also integrated the tragic event into their corporate culture as a grim reminder of the importance of safety and the dire consequences of negligence. Grenfell Tower Fire and Cladding Scandal. The Grenfell Tower Fire in London became a symbol of corporate and regulatory failure when flames rapidly spread across the building's exterior cladding, leading to the loss of 72 lives. The tragedy brought to light the use of flammable cladding material, which, while cheaper, did not meet fire safety standards. The subsequent investigations and public outcry highlighted the often fatal consequences of cost-cutting measures and the need for stringent compliance with building regulations to ensure public safety. Years after the disaster, many buildings in the UK were found to still have similar hazardous cladding, sparking a nationwide debate on housing safety and corporate responsibility. The Radium Girls. In the early 20th century, female factory workers, known as the Radium Girls, painted watch dials with radioactive paint, not knowing the grave danger they were in. Assured by their employers that the radium was safe, they even used their lips to point their brushes, ingesting the deadly substance. As the workers began to fall ill with devastating symptoms, including the disintegration of jawbones, the companies denied responsibility and discredited the women's suffering. It was a stark case of corporate indifference to human life, with the effects of the radiation poisoning haunting the workers for the rest of their lives. The Facebook and Cambridge Analytica data scandal. The Facebook and Cambridge Analytica data scandal revealed a disturbing breach of trust when it was discovered that the data of millions of Facebook users was harvested without consent and used for political advertising. The scandal brought to light the vulnerabilities in personal data security and raised profound questions about privacy in the digital age. It also sparked a global conversation about the ethics of data mining and the responsibilities of tech companies to protect user information. This controversy underscored the extent to which personal data has become a commodity in the corporate world and the lengths companies will go to exploit it for economic and political gain. 3D printed oxygen valves. During the peak of the COVID-19 crisis, an Italian hospital faced a shortage of oxygen mask valves. With lives on the line, a local engineer offered to produce the valves using 3D printing technology. However, the company holding the patent refused to share the blueprints and allegedly threatened legal action for patent infringement. The engineer proceeded regardless, successfully printing the valves and saving numerous lives, highlighting the ethical dilemma between intellectual property rights and humanitarian needs in times of crisis. Horse meat scandal. The horse meat scandal rocked the food industry when it was discovered that various beef products across Europe actually contained undeclared horse meat. This breach of trust between consumers and food providers raised serious concerns about food labeling, supply chain transparency, and the integrity of the food industry. The scandal had widespread repercussions, leading to product recalls, legal actions against companies involved, and a heightened public demand for stricter food regulation and testing. Companies profiting in Nazi Germany. The involvement of established companies in Nazi Germany remains one of the most unsettling chapters of corporate history. Several international corporations continue to operate and even thrive under the Third Reich, with some accused of directly profiting from the war economy and the regime's atrocities. Companies like IBM have faced scrutiny for their role in providing technology that facilitated the identification and categorization of prisoners in concentration camps. This dark legacy is a chilling reminder of the moral compromises companies may make in the pursuit of profit. Tier 3: Sugar versus Fat Conspiracy. In one of the more notorious instances of science being manipulated by corporate interests, the sugar industry was exposed for funding research that downplayed the adverse health effects of sugar consumption, particularly its role in heart disease. Instead, these studies pointed the finger at dietary fats, influencing decades of nutritional guidance and public perception. This strategic deflection allowed sugar producers to maintain their products' image and marketability, even as evidence mounted about sugar's role in various health problems, including obesity and diabetes. The revelation of this conspiracy has since cast a shadow over nutrition science, raising awareness to how corporate funding can potentially bias health recommendations and lead to widespread public health implications. Union busting. Union busting is a calculated and often aggressive strategy employed by some employers to prevent the formation or effectiveness of worker unions. These tactics can involve hiring anti-union legal firms, intimidating worker organizers, propagating anti-union propaganda, and even wrongfully terminating pro-union employees. In some cases, companies restructure workforces or relocate operations to weaken existing unions. Union busting is not merely an attack on a specific labor organization, but an assault on the broader principle of workers' rights. This practice perpetuates a power imbalance in the workplace, suppresses wages, and erodes the quality of working conditions, contributing to broader socioeconomic inequalities and undermining the collective bargaining power that is central to democratic societies. Takata airbag recalls. The Takata airbag recall scandal serves as a grim reminder of the potentially tragic consequences of compromised product safety standards. With a market share of approximately 20%, Takata's defective airbags were responsible for a series of accidents causing injuries and deaths, most shockingly illustrated when a woman's neck was slashed open by metal shrapnel from a deploying airbag. The enormity of the recall, over 60 million vehicles, not only led to Takata's bankruptcy, but also triggered a global reckoning in automotive safety standards and oversight, compelling the industry to re-evaluate and reinforce consumer safety protocols. McDonald's ice cream machine conspiracy. The McDonald's ice cream machine controversy is a curious case in the fast food industry where franchise owners have faced persistent issues with machines supplied by the Taylor Company. These machines, often breaking down and accompanied by complicated manuals that provide little help, seem designated to necessitate costly repairs by Taylor's technicians. with 25% of Taylor's profits reportedly coming from such services. Allegations have arisen that these machines were intentionally designed for failure to generate a continuous revenue stream from maintenance, raising ethical questions about the business practices of profiting from partner dependencies. Buffalo Creek Flood. The Buffalo Creek Flood of 1972, a calamity precipitated by the collapse of a coal slurry impoundment dam, is a somber example of corporate neglect and the tragic consequences that can follow. Despite assurances from inspectors, the dam, owned by the Pittston Coal Company, gave way, unleashing a wave of waste that claimed 125 lives and left thousands homeless. The subsequent inquiry, clouded by potential conflicts of interest and accusations of industry bias, controversially concluded the event as an act of God, exonerating the coal company from liability. This narrative has been challenged by critics who argue that it was preventable and that it highlights the need for stringent oversight and accountability in industrial operations. Diamond industry. The diamond industry, dominated by companies such as De Beers, has long been criticized for practices like price fixing and creating an artificial scarcity of diamonds to inflate value. This industry has also been marred by the sale of blood diamonds, which are mined in war zones and sold to finance conflicts. Despite the availability of lab-created diamonds that are indistinguishable from natural ones, the industry has managed to maintain the perception that natural, even flawed, diamonds are more valuable through aggressive marketing campaigns. Insulin patents. The pharmaceutical industry's handling of insulin patents is a controversial subject, especially as the prices for insulin have skyrocketed. 3 major companies dominate the market, using their patents to keep prices high, a form of price fixing that has made insulin particularly expensive in the United States, sometimes up to 8 times the price of international rates. This situation has dire consequences for diabetics who rely on insulin for survival, and has sparked a debate on the ethics of patenting life-saving medications and the balance between corporate profits and public health. South Sea Bubble. The South Sea Bubble was an economic crisis in 1720 that became a classic example of a speculative bubble. The South Sea Company, established in the early 18th century, was granted a monopoly over trade in the South Seas in exchange for assuming England's war debt. The company's stock prices were driven to dizzying heights on speculation and false claims of profitability, leading to a catastrophic crash that devastated the British economy. This financial disaster has since been studied as a cautionary tale of speculative investment and the dangers of mixing corporate interest with public finance. Nestlé business practices. Nestlé, one of the largest food and beverage companies in the world, has often been called out for questionable business practices. One of the most significant controversies involves the marketing of infant formula in developing countries, where Nestlé was accused of aggressively marketing formula as superior to breastfeeding, despite the health risks posed by mixing formula with unsafe water. As a result, mothers who were initially given free samples were later forced to purchase formula at high prices, leading to economic strain and health issues for their infants. Nestlé's actions have been widely condemned as exploiting vulnerable populations for profit. Printer ink price markup. The business model of selling printers at a low initial cost with high-priced replacement ink cartridges is a widely criticized practice in the printer industry. companies are known to mark up the price of ink significantly, ensuring ongoing revenue well beyond the printer's sale. This strategy has been spotlighted by consumer advocates and various media, including a well-known YouTube video, yet remains a standard practice, leaving many consumers unaware of the long-term costs when purchasing a printer. Boeing 737 new engine controversy. Boeing 737 MAX controversy represents a critical moment in aviation history where corporate decisions had severe repercussions. In a rush to compete with Airbus, Boeing opted to re-engineer the 737 rather than design a new plane. This decision led to the MAX's flawed design, where the engine size and placement affected the plane's aerodynamics. The light refresher training provided to pilots was grossly insufficient for the changes in the aircraft's handling, contributing to 2 fatal crashes. The aftermath forced a global grounding of the fleet and called into question Boeing's commitment to safety over expediency and cost-saving measures. Criminals laundering dirty money via mainstream banks. Money laundering through mainstream banks is a systemic issue that undermines the integrity of global financial institutions. Drug cartels, organized crime rings, and corrupt officials have exploited vulnerabilities in banking systems to legitimize their illicit gains, casting a shadow over the banking sector. Despite regulations aimed at curbing such activities, the complex nature of global finance allows for loopholes and lapses that these criminal entities deftly navigate. Claricon sanitizer recall. In a startling case of safety oversight, Claricon Biological Chemistry Laboratory was forced to recall several of its hand sanitizers after an FDA inspection revealed contamination with various bacteria, including those associated with unsanitary conditions. The recall underscored the critical importance of regulatory oversight in the manufacturing of health products and the potential dangers posed to the public, including hospitals and healthcare providers that might unknowingly use such compromised products. Union Street Guesthouse negative review fine. In an unusual twist on customer service, the Union Street Guesthouse in New York once implemented a policy that fined guests for leaving negative online reviews, a practice that drew widespread ire and highlighted the tension between business reputation management and consumer free speech. The policy, which charged $500 for negative feedback, raised legal and ethical questions about the lengths to which a business can or should go to protect its image. Lockheed bribery scandal. The Lockheed bribery scandal of the 1970s exposed the dark side of international business, where the aerospace giant Lockheed was found to have paid millions in bribes to foreign officials to secure contracts for its aircraft. This scandal resulted in significant consequences, including the resignation of a Japanese prime minister, and led to the enactment of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act in the United States, aimed at preventing such unethical business practices in the future. Tier 4. Asbestos in Johnson & Johnson talcum powder. For years, Johnson & Johnson's talcum powder was a staple in homes across the globe, symbolizing purity and trust. However, beneath this veneer of safety, the company was embroiled in a scandal of monumental proportions. Internal documents eventually unearthed in court proceedings suggested that Johnson & Johnson knew about the trace amount of asbestos in their talcum powder products and chose not to disclose this to the public. The revelation of this concealment led to a cascade of lawsuits from consumers who developed cancer, which they attributed to long-term use of the product. The company has faced numerous legal battles and substantial financial losses, not to mention the irreparable damage to its reputation. Enron causes blackouts. The Enron scandal is perhaps one of the most infamous tales of corporate greed and deception. As a giant in the energy trading world, Enron's manipulative practices included creating artificial energy shortages by ordering power blackouts, shockingly documented in over-the-phone conversations now available on YouTube. These engineered blackouts drove up energy prices, padding Enron's profit, but causing widespread disruption and economic damage. The scandal unraveled in 2001 when the company's massive accounting fraud came to light, leading to its dramatic bankruptcy. Enron's downfall became synonymous with corporate malfeasance and prompted a re-evaluation of corporate oversight and accounting standards. Match Girls Strike. The Match Girls Strike of 1888 is a seminal event in labor history, marking a turning point in industrial working conditions. Women and girls employed in the matchstick industry were subjected to the toxic effects of white phosphorus, a cheaper alternative to the safer red phosphorus, leading to horrific medical conditions such as phossy jaw, a disfiguring and painful disease. The harsh realities of their work, compounded by long hours, child labor, poor treatment, and punitive fines for trivial offenses like dirty feet, led to a series of strikes. These strikes not only highlighted the exploitation rampant in the industry, but also ignited a movement that would eventually lead to significant labor reforms. Burger King Pokemon recalls. Burger King found itself at the center of a tragic controversy when a promotional Pokemon toy included in their kids' meal turned deadly. The toy, a small plastic Pokeball, was responsible for the suffocation of a child, leading to an outcry for a recall. Initially resistant, Burger King eventually conceded, but not before another child nearly suffocated, and tragically, yet another child died from the same cause a month later. This incident put a spotlight on the safety of promotional items and the moral responsibility companies have to ensure that their products, especially those aimed at children, are safe. Banana Republics. The concept of banana republics originally described Central American nations like Honduras and Guatemala, which were dominated by foreign corporations such as the United Fruit Company, now called Chiquita Brands International. These companies exerted disproportionate influence over the politics, economy, and social structure of these nations, often colluding with local elites and dictatorial regimes to maintain their agricultural monopolies, particularly in the banana industry. The exploitation of land and labor, the orchestration of coups, and the suppression of populist reforms led to political instability and social unrest. The term has since evolved to symbolize any small country that is politically unstable, dependent on limited agriculture or mineral exports, and ruled in a despotic manner that serves foreign interests. The history of these banana republics underscores the dangers of allowing corporate entities to wield excessive power over the sovereign affairs of a nation, often leading to long-lasting consequences for its development and democracy. Peanut Corporation Salmonella Outbreak. The Peanut Corporation of America's salmonella outbreak is a stark reminder of the consequences of neglecting food safety. With a history of violations dating back to the 1980s, The company continued operations until 2009, when an outbreak linked to their product caused 9 deaths and sickened hundreds. The company's response was a recall across the state of Texas, but the damage had been done. Within 24 hours of the recall, the Peanut Corporation of America filed for bankruptcy, leaving a trail of questions about the effectiveness of food safety regulations. Rana Plaza/Dhaka factory collapse. The Rana Plaza disaster in Dhaka, Bangladesh, stands as a stark example of the cost of neglect in the global fashion industry. Despite visible cracks in the building structure, workers were ordered to continue production. The resulting collapse in 2013 claimed the lives of 1,134 people, marking it as one of the deadliest industrial accidents in modern history. The tragedy brought global attention to the working conditions of the garment industry and prompted calls for systemic change, including better safety standards and corporate accountability for the labor practices of suppliers. Johnstown Flood. The Johnstown Flood of 1889 was a devastating disaster exacerbated by human error and corporate indifference. The South Fork Dam, maintained by a private club that included prominent industrialists, was known to have structural issues. However, the club lowered the dam to build a road without addressing these concerns. When the dam burst, a wall of water descended on Johnstown, Pennsylvania, killing 2,208 people and wiping out entire families. The subsequent legal proceedings absolved the club's members of responsibilities, attributing the catastrophe to an act of God, a verdict that did little to address the negligence involved or provide solace to the many who lost everything. Sanlu Milk Powder Scandal. The Sanlu Milk Powder Scandal is one of the most grievous examples of corporate malfeasance in the food industry. In 2008, Sanlu Group, a Chinese dairy company, was found to be altering its baby formula with melamine, a compound used to falsely inflate protein content readings. This dangerous cost-saving measure led to the death of 6 infants and the hospitalization of around 54,000, causing a national uproar over food safety standards and corporate ethics. The Chinese government's response was swift, with product recalls and the execution of 2 individuals involved, highlighting the severe consequences of corporate shortcuts in product safety. Serfdom. Serfdom is the term for a form of labor coercion comparable to slavery and has left an inedible mark on history. Landowners would rent out their land to serfs who lived on it and farmed it, creating a cycle of dependency and debt that could be passed down through generations. Although the practice has been abolished in Europe, accusations of serfdom persisted in regions like Tibet until the mid-20th century. The legacy of serfdom remains a powerful reminder of the historical exploitation of labor by those in power. German automobile emissions collusion. The German automobile emissions scandal brought to light a collusion among car manufacturers, including giants like Volkswagen and BMW, to stifle competition in emissions-reducing technology. Starting as early as 2006, these companies were accused of holding back the development of cleaner technologies, thereby denying consumers the option to purchase more environmentally friendly vehicles. The scandal not only resulted in legal repercussions, but also sparked a debate on corporate collusion and its impact on innovation and environmental stewardship. Bhopal gas disaster. The Bhopal gas disaster of 1984 is one of the most tragic industrial accidents in history. the Union Carbide India pesticide plant in Bhopal had a record of safety issues, yet improvements to health and safety protocols were grossly inadequate. When a gas leak occurred, ineffective emergency measures led to a dense cloud of toxic gas enveloping the surrounding community. Over 3,000 people died in the immediate aftermath, with bodies buried in mass graves and survivors suffering long-term health effects. The CEO of Union Carbide, Warren Anderson, faced extradition demands from India, but was never held accountable in a court of law, leaving a wound of injustice in the heart of Bhopal that persists to this day. SeaWorld espionage against activists. SeaWorld entered a storm of controversy when it was revealed that the company had engaged in espionage against animal rights activists. Employees were directed to infiltrate these groups and engage in acts designed to discredit the activists, including inciting extreme behavior and making threats on social media. The scandal came to light following a whistleblower's revelations, forcing SeaWorld to acknowledge and cease these covert operations. Simplicity crib deaths. Simplicity Inc., a manufacturer of baby cribs, was implicated in a tragic and preventable series of infant deaths due to design flaws in their products. Faulty cribs led to several cases where infants were fatally trapped or suffocated. Despite recalls in 2007 and 2008 and assurances of design changes, further deaths and incidents occurred, resulting in additional recalls and intense scrutiny over product safety standards. The Simplicity crib deaths are a sobering reminder of the critical importance of product safety and the devastating consequences when it is not adequately ensured. Tier 5. Albanian Pyramid Scheme Collapse and Civil War. The collapse of the Albanian pyramid schemes in the mid-1990s was a catastrophic financial and social event that pushed the country to the brink of civil war. In the wake of communist rule, Albania embraced the free market with little regulatory oversight or financial literacy among the populace. The allure of quick wealth led many to invest in pyramid schemes, which once unraveled caused widespread economic devastation. The ensuing chaos saw the population, having lost their life savings, erupt into riots and looting, leading to a state of anarchy that ultimately resulted in the collapse of the government. This period serves as a profound lesson in the dangers of financial fraud and the importance of economic education and sound regulatory frameworks. Plastic companies and recycling conspiracy. The narrative spun by plastic companies and the recycling industry has been one of the more subtle and pervasive environmental conspiracies. As public concern over waste and environmental degradation grew, the emphasis on recycling was championed by large corporations, particularly plastic manufacturers. This focus on recycling served to overshadow the more impactful strategies of reducing and reusing materials which would have directly affected corporate profits. The insidious nature of this conspiracy lies in its deflection of responsibility, placing the burden of environmental protection on consumers and governmental bodies, while corporations continue to produce vast quantities of single-use plastics, as highlighted in the documentary Plastic Wars. Salad Oil Scandal. The salad oil scandal of 1963 is a monumental episode of corporate fraud in American history. The Allied Crude Vegetable Oil Company orchestrated a scheme by filling storage tanks with water topped with a thin layer of salad oil to deceive inspectors and secure financial backing based on these inflated inventory reports. The discovery of this fraud sent shockwaves through the financial sector, resulting in over $180 million in losses and the collapse of several companies, thereby illustrating the far-reaching consequences of corporate deception. Pre-Grenfell cladding fires. Before the Grenfell Tower tragedy, there were ominous precedents that foreshadowed the dangers of combustible cladding. The Summerland Leisure Center and Lakanal House fires were harbingers of the potential for cladding to contribute to rapid fire spread. Despite these incidents, similar materials were used in subsequent constructions, including Grenfell, pointing to systemic failures in building safety regulations and oversight. The losses from these fires have led to an ongoing reevaluation of fire safety standards in construction and a push for reforms to prevent future tragedies. MV seawall sinking. The MV seawall disaster was a maritime tragedy that shook South Korea, shedding light on the lethal consequences of corporate cost-cutting and regulatory oversight failures. The vessel, overloaded with cargo and with insufficient ballast water, was structurally compromised and unable to withstand the sharp turn that led to its sinking. The loss of 299 lives, many of whom were high school students, prompted a national outcry, leading to a thorough investigation and the reshaping of South Korea's safety regulations. Quaker Oats radiation experiments. The Quaker Oats radiation experiments represent a dark moment in the annals of corporate history where the pursuit of scientific knowledge crossed ethical boundaries. Conducted on unsuspecting disabled children at the Fernald State School, these experiments aimed to track the absorption of nutrients by adding radioactive tracers to the children's oatmeal. The lack of informed consent and the potential health risks to which these children were unknowingly exposed led to public outrage, legal battles, and a settlement, raising serious questions about the ethics of corporate-sponsored scientific research. The robber barons. The era of the robber barons was marked by the meteoric rise of industrial magnates who amassed fortunes and wielded significant economic power in the United States. While these tycoons, like John Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, and J.P. Morgan, were lauded for their contributions to industrialization and philanthropy, they also engaged in practices that would be deemed unethical by today's standards, including the creation of monopolies, exploitation of workers, and the suppression of competition through aggressive and sometimes violent tactics. Their legacies are a complex blend of innovation and exploitation, contributing to the economic development of the nation while also exacerbating social inequalities. Gadani Shipyard Aces Fire. The Gadani Shipyard Aces Fire in Pakistan was a catastrophic event, highlighting the dire safety conditions in one of the world's largest ship-breaking yards. The absence of safety protocols, combined with the hazardous nature of the work, led to a fire that claimed the lives of 26 workers and left many more with severe injuries. Investigations revealed a stark disregard for worker safety, with inadequate provision of protective equipment or even basic necessities like food and water, reflecting a broader issue of neglect in labor-intensive industries. Music industry copyright leeches. The music industry has faced its fair share of parasitic practices, notably the emergence of entities known as copyright leeches. These companies exploit legal loopholes by creating vast libraries of short, often 1 second long audio clips, which they then copyright. They use these copyrights to claim infringement against artists and producers, often settling out of court for financial gain. This practice has drawn criticism for stifling creativity and exploiting the legal system for profit rather than contributing to the cultural and artistic value of the music industry. Destruction of the Aral Sea. The Aral Sea disaster is one of the most dire examples of environmental degradation, where the pursuit of economic gains by state-run projects and later oil companies led to an ecological catastrophe. In Uzbekistan, government officials, often under the shadow of corruption, sanctioned the diversion of the Amu Darya and the Sir Darya rivers for agricultural irrigation, mainly to cultivate cotton known as white gold. This decision, coupled with oil extraction activities, triggered a dramatic shrinking of the lake, leading to its split into separate bodies of water and a significant reduction in size. The consequences have been dire. A once thriving fishing industry obliterated, local climates altered, and dust storms from the exposed lakebed carrying harmful salts and pesticides, impacting the health of millions. I hope you enjoyed this video. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Thanks.